Okay, this is a video to show the installation of a toilet. I have a new toilet flange installed on a tile floor, and I have pre-positioned the toilet bolts in position. The toilet that I'm going to be installing, I have right here. This toilet I've moved from a different location in the house, and I'm moving it to this location. And the previous location that it was at, we felt that there might have been a sewer odor, and upon removing the toilet, I didn't find any obvious problem with the flange or the gasket, the wax seal. But at the same time, there did seem to be potentially a vapor leak. There was no fluid leak. This is the what remains of the wax ring that was used for that, and I didn't see any real problem with it. Now, the one thing that I did notice that I'm slightly suspicious of is that on the metal flange ring, that one also had a metal flange ring, I did notice that the metal wasn't so strong so that it wasn't distorted. In other words, the tightening of the bolts had pulled up on the ring. Now, part of this could be over tightening of the bolts, but the other part about it is that the flange might have become distorted over the years of use. It was about 7 years in use. And if it becomes distorted like that, that could be a sign that there was a loosening of the wax seal and possibly a failure on the wax seal. But there was no rocking on the toilet. It was on a sheet vinyl floor with a Luan underlayment, and it seemed okay. I didn't notice any rocking. The wood floor is fine. There was no leaks. Anyway, but I will say this. In this new approach, I am using the double nut method. Now, in the double nut method, the toilet bolt is bolted rigidly into position before trying to position the toilet. I did not use that on the other one. And I will notice that a byproduct of this is that by using this, these extra washers sandwich the flange and compress it along with the back side of this toilet toilet bolt. And I think that might strengthen it in terms of it being about the ability of this to distort. It might make it stronger. That's really not the primary reason I was doing that. Primary reason was I just kind of noticed it on the internet, people using it as a way of simplifying the installation, because this nut will no longer turn and it won't flop around as you're trying to install the toilet. It is perfectly rigid. So as a pre-step, I really like it. Now, this is the wax seal that I'm planning on using. It's the same style. This one actually is a little bit old, but from what I can tell, they don't really have a shelf life, and it seems fine. My concern about it is that, is it going to be dimensionally solid? So I did make some measurements on the toilet. So for example, where the wax seal is actually going to sit is going to be around that horn, okay? And it's quite easy to actually make some measurements. It's about 3/4 of an inch, or a little bit less actually. The 3/4, it's actually 11/16. 12/16 would be 3/4, okay? But it's about 3/4. That's about how much you have to work with. Now, the height of the flange, and that flange, the top of the flange is going to sit right in that area. So the height of the flange over the floor is going to be important, okay? They say in the textbooks or online, the flange should be 1/4 of an inch off the floor. Well, that's really too simplistic, because this ring is completely down on the floor, and the height of that flange over the floor is 7/16. Okay, it's an extra 3/16. It's not 1/4 of an inch. It's over 1/4 of an inch, and that's the way it's designed to be. Okay, it's almost 1/2 an inch, and this is almost 3/4 of an inch. So what's going to happen is there's about 1/4 inch of clearance on the top of this, which is where the wax ring is going to get squeezed down from its size of about 3/4 of an inch or so, down to about 1/4 of an inch in the middle section where this height is. That's where it's squeezed. That's where you form the seal. Now, I only mention this because I want to make sure everything's going to fit. Now, I'm going to do a dry fit. So one of the ideas that I picked up online was to do a dry fit and see if there's any rocking. Because it would rock if the toilet were actually resting on this. It should not rest on that because that would imply that it was bottoming out here. Okay, so you don't want to see that. But another thing that I had to make sure here was I made measurements on this ring to make sure it would fit in here. You see, this is a 3-inch spigot flange, which means it fits on the inside of a 3-inch pipe. That is essentially the narrowest opening you're going to get. And it turns out that after I knocked this out, this had a knockout on it. It had a kind of a rough edge, and it still has a lip on it. It's not the dimension of the pipe. The inside of the 3-inch pipe is 3 inches, but now when you put something into the inside of that, now you're less. Okay. Anyway, measuring this across, its diameter is slightly less than 2 3/4. And this one is slightly more than 2 3/4. It just barely fits. And I noticed, for example, here that if I slide it over it, and I look at it from the side, it just makes it down onto the ring. Okay? In other words, the horn is not getting in the way. The horn could get in the way and affect your dimensions, but it does not appear as though it will do that in this case. Some people are opposed to using the horn because they feel as though it can obstruct and create a dimensional problem and create a leak. So, okay, I'm going to hit pause, and then I'm going to do a dry fit, which is to say I'm just simply going to take the toilet, and I'm going to place it over here, and then check to see if there's any rocking. Okay, thanks. So I'm going to hit pause. Okay, now, here is the dry fit. Now, one thing you want to check for when you're doing the dry fit is you want to make sure that the double nut, that is the nut that's underneath, is not, that there's room for it, okay? And in this case, this cutout is big enough, so the nut is actually just slightly coming up into this channel, okay? But it's not obstructing it. You don't want that. You don't want the toilet resting, of course, on the nut. And on this side, there's even less obstruction because the toilet flange ring goes slightly closer down to the floor. That's where it contacts the floor, and the nut is completely underneath that. Okay, now, the idea here is to check for a wobble. And you can see that when I push on it, I can get a wobble. It's a very small amount. What I did also with the dry fit is I tightened the toilet nuts, and I sat on the toilet and there's no wobble. In other words, the wobble will go away with the tightening of the nuts. But I also noticed that it is possible to shim it. So for example, here, this is just a little sheet of plastic that I got off of the top of a container of oatmeal. I just cut it to the right shape, and when the toilet is slightly pushed up, I can slide this underneath, which I've just slid it partially underneath. Now, when I push on it, I cannot get any rocking. And the reason is because I experimented with that particular section. I happen to know that that's the high spot. In other words, by using this paper, I can kind of slide it around. I know where it's actually hitting over here. It's hitting over here. This is actually a spot where there's a dip. This is what you might call the high spot. This is where it's actually contacting. So by placing, and it's literally only that amount of rock, very small amount. The bolts would basically make it secure enough so that the weight of it would not rock it. But in this particular case, the fact that I can slide this under and eliminate the rock completely before putting on the wax ring tells me that I want to do it. Now, this is too thin to actually use the shims. Toilet shims won't get that thin, okay? So I didn't bother to buy those. And this is just completely customized for this particular floor and the particular bottom of this particular toilet. I just don't want there to be any leaks on this or I want the seal to be as good as I can get it. So, okay, I hit pause, and then I'll put the wax ring on, and then we'll go from there, okay? Okay, I took the plastic cover, the saran wrap off of the ring, and I've placed it down. I pushed it in on the black part. I have made some, I've bumped into the wax, but that's going to get squeezed down to only about 1/4 of an inch in the important section. So that does not have to be perfect in my opinion. I think it should be fine. You can see it's already squeezed out because of the bolt locations. Now, I've already practiced dry fitting this, so I know pretty much how to slide this toilet down, just directly down over the bolt holes. So I don't think I'm going to have a terrible problem in terms of getting it in there and then pushing down on it equally, uniformly, and then tightening the bolts. But I'll hit pause now and I might show an intermediate step on how that's going. Okay, I put the toilet on and I just dropped it to try to make the bolts centered, because according to the dry fit, center was how I had it set up. So there should be enough room in there for the nut to not contact the toilet. Now I've sat on it and pushed on it, but now I'm going to, I inserted the shim. I just pushed it all the way in. Okay, right, it's not going to stop rocking right now because the wax seal is still in position, but that is the spot where it caused it to not rock. Okay, which means that there shouldn't be any pressure on the seal because the toilet has no tendency to rock. Okay, now I'm just going to apply the hardware and start snugging it up. Okay, and then see if the rock is completely gone. Okay, I'll let pause. Okay, I snugged it up some more. I alternately sat on it, and then I noticed the bolts would be a little bit looser, and I just kept snugging it up. Now, one thing that I did while I was doing it was I was checking to see how much clearance there was under the toilet. And now I notice that it's making contact in the back. Okay, and then it's clear. It makes contact up here where I added the shim. And it's making contact on this other side. So basically, over on this edge. So as soon as it makes 3 points of contact, then it's contacted the floor, and it won't rock because it has 3 points. And tightening it now is not really bringing the toilet closer to the floor because the toilet is already sitting on the floor. It's compressing the flange, metal flange, and the seal. So I'm not going to tighten this up all the way right now. I'm just going to let it sit overnight. I'm going to add the tank, get everything ready, and then I'll probably, snug it up because I want it to be tight, but I'm not going to crank on it too much. Okay. Snug is the key. Don't break anything. Okay? And there's no rocking here. I'm not going to go overboard, but based on, the testing that I did when it was dry, that's completely gone. So I am happy with the result. Okay? Very good. Okay, thanks. Bye.